What are you doing, Crane? Come on. This isn't really you. Who are you fooling? What are you doing here? Who are you, Crane? You know none of this is real. You know you're never going to amount to anything. You just don't know when to walk away, do you? I just don't like you. VRChat. Releasing all the way back in January 2014, the platform recently celebrated its 10-year anniversary. It's changed a lot in that time, but generally it's always been true that VRChat is a social platform more than it is a game. Similar to Habba Hotel, Gaia Online, IMVU, Second Life, Roblox, or your favorite MMO, it acts as a third space for users, a gathering place where users all over the world are connected via a lobby system analogous to joining any random game server for any other game. Settings exist to limit the visibility and openness for other users to join based on a sliding scale of increasingly restrictive criteria to meet, ending in completely private lobbies with the right settings. That being beside the point, most worlds themselves certainly have the potential to provide meaningful content to the antisocial, but the game itself is ultimately devoid of meaningful content without others to experience it with. Online interactions not rated by the ESRB. The elephant in the room. We're just gonna tackle it early, I suppose. Is it fair to judge a platform based on its users? I think it's generally not, but I understand the argument on both sides. It's the players who make the community. The platform just facilitates that community. Put online interactions aside for a moment, and also consider that 99% of the content, aside from a brief initial tutorial and default homeworld, that all content, including worlds and avatars, will be UGC. That's user-generated content for the uninitiated. Is it fair to judge a platform by its UGC? I think it depends on a glass half full versus glass half empty type of mentality, and in what way you're trying to direct that criticism. You can't really tiptoe around a topic like this. There's a reason why videos like VRChat has a perception problem released just a month ago by YouTuber DaraFrog are not at all unique. Don't let the bunny fool you. He's a frog. A small update to the story, VRChat recently announced age verification in their latest developer update. Clearly the outcry from the public was heard. Regardless, with Christmas coming up, we should be expecting to see a new wave of what some of my friends affectionately refer to as the Xbox Live audience. I'm sure the name alone could make you vividly imagine the kind of environment we're talking about. But comparing the historical footage of those spaces from over 10 years ago with the kinds of environments we find in VRChat today, there is a disturbing similarity. While this segment of the player base is massive, it still only represents a minority of the groups and archetypes of players you can encounter. In a non-comprehensive manner, purely speaking from the perspective of a USA-based EN user, I would list these as the questies, the gooners, the furries, the clubbers, the cultists, the mutes, the deaf, the LGBT, the group moderators, the Europeans, the Asians, and the content creators. Each of these broad categories has smaller subcategories. While we could take the time to break them all down individually and go through each subcategory, each is deserving of their own video ultimately, and it remains outside the scope of this video to go so deeply into detail. The mixed membership of these groups and their interactions can create chaotic environments for everyone involved. VRChat is unique as the largest VRSNS. Yes, other VRSNS platforms exist, but they simply don't compare in terms of user adoption rates or brand recognition. VR is the operative acronym here. What's the difference between sending a tweet and tagging someone, giving somebody a phone call, meeting with somebody in VRChat, and meeting that friend at a real bar? You can see the sliding scale of abstraction I laid those out in and how VR occupies a space between virtual and real. It's hard to explain how it feels to sit across from somebody virtually in the same way that you might sit across from somebody physically. There's a consideration for phantom sense and haptic feedback gear. Are you using full body tracking? Is it Lighthouse-based tracking or IMU-based tracking? Are you standalone or PC VR? The rabbit hole gets deeper and deeper. There are a million channels that specialize in explaining all of the nuances of the VR experience. Maybe I can provide a unique perspective on that, or help a new cycle of people discover all of those things for the first time with a new creator. But that's not the purpose of this video. Feel. You want to know how it feels to spend half a year of your life as a digital being. What I did with all of that time. I created my original account on December 26th, 2017 via Steam login. At that time, I had promised myself that VR was a future investment I wanted to make, it being a lifelong dream of mine to enter the Matrix. Growing up in an environment of cyberpunk media, properties like Code Lyoko, Reboot, Scooby-Doo, Johnny Mnemonic, and other such fitting examples, I always dreamed of surfing the information superhighway with the cyber dolphins. Snow Crash is not a work of dystopian fiction when it describes the sky as the color of a television tuned to a dead channel, or the poor only seeing static facsimiles of the more fortunate. It reflects the actual reality of users in our own equivalent to the Digiverse. Point aside, with my initial account creation, I spent a short time doing the same thing everybody else was doing around that time. Wearing a short knuckles model, clicking my mouth, and asking people if they knew the way. A lot has changed in those 7 years, but it highlights a base human truth, which is the need to engage in communal ritual. The barrier to entry for VR to me was cost, as it was for a lot of people. I didn't want to compromise, and going with a trusted brand name whose hardware I was satisfied with in the past, I held out to save enough for a Valve Index. 3 years passed, and a lot of financial hardship later, I found myself in the unique position of having gotten a new job close to the release of a very influential product, the Oculus Quest 2. With an extremely competitive price point of only $300 and PC VR capabilities, it could get my foot in the door and act as a trade-up for a better experience. With every dime of my first paycheck, I was the proud owner of a new headset. I only encountered one error. I built my PC back in 2014, thus, I was still running Windows 7. Without knowing of or wanting to invest in any third-party software at the time, this locked me out of the ability to use my VR headset for PC VR. So for my first few months in VRChat, I was relegated to the lowly status of Questie. I know the theatrics are a bit heavy, but could you imagine if this were a 4,300-hour review for any other game? Yeah, so the early game consists of you forming covenants with NPCs that have dynamic schedules and quests they want you to complete, but they're all batshit crazy and there's a bunch of goblins shouting racial pejoratives and homophobic slurs all over the place, and you know what? You can't even slay them for gold. What are they good for? That lasts for the first 1,500 hours, but the game really opens up after that. Don't you love it when people tell you that about video games? Jokes aside, VRChat truly is the Dark Souls of social networking services. No, that's not a joke. Stick with me here. The objective of VRChat is to avoid going hollow. What do I mean by this? In a timeless environment where the only boundaries that exist between people interacting with each other are comparatively low monetary hurdles concerning platform and sometimes difficult to acquire social standing depending on who exactly you want to encounter, your digital existence inside of VRChat is meaningless without connection. You are a lost and sovereignless soul without purpose. Thus, building bonds with other users and seeking them out becomes the feedback loop by which you actualize your digital existence, and thus express your humanity. Regardless of that, there is no objective marker in the HUD informing the player of this. Not even a dude to spell out the prophecy for you. A user could go their entire lives as a questie who never gets to experience PCVR avatars in their full breadth of their beauty when allowed unrestricted access to the shaders they make use of. Others may never have the opportunity to meet the world creators of their favorite spaces in-game, or realize that they can follow these people on social media outside of the game. Most people also usually live private and reserved lives, not interacting outside of a certain friend circle, or having no motivation otherwise to discover the wider world around them. Still, you are born anew in the digital fires, your soul now laid bare and embodied by a shell you do not yet understand that one day you can make entirely your own. To this place where destiny is made, you will come unprepared. Many new users experience headaches, eye strain, fatigue, nausea, vertigo, motion sickness, or heightened phantom sense. Like a baby whose eyes have not yet adjusted to the bright lights of the world outside of the womb, these users have not yet acclimated themselves to the experience of wearing the headset, and without any further incentive to push past any early growing pains, as you learn to walk, who can blame them? The same frustration you felt learning to use a joystick on a gamepad, or playing your first shooter or action game with a keyboard and mouse. That difficulty of learning an entirely new interface, both physical and visual, is experienced again as one acclimates themselves to their digital environment and workflow. The same way a pilot has multiple stages before they take off from a runway. Many VR users develop a ritual of different programs, settings, and peripherals that they have to put on or launch and then subsequently take off or close. It's very unlikely that any new users are going to master this skill before they enter VRChat. So those growing pains come along with your lack of purpose or social connection to guide and aid you in your growth. We're going to call this particular skill someone's ability to interface, but you can think of it like adaptability in Dark Souls 2. Basically, it speeds up all of the animations you perform. I know this makes you wonder what the full character stat sheet looks like for a VRChat user, but I'm sorry to inform you that, given all of these variables are hidden behind the game's code and not visible to the players during any point of their playthrough, it's difficult to discern the full set of skills each VRChat user truly encompasses as part of their character build. So, given whatever stats you had in reality the moment you logged into VRChat for the first time, those will determine your starting attributes and social standing in the game to varying degrees. There is a very brief initial tutorial that one experiences before being deposited into the default homeworld, where players encounter one of the biggest beginner's traps every user is susceptible to falling for. The mirror serves as this quintessential first boss of VRChat. I don't want to discount it entirely with that framing. For those that struggle with identity, being able to perceive your idealized self can be an amazing form of therapy, but excessive and prolonged alone time spent in front of the mirror comes at a cost. It is truly both a modern identitarian's wish come true and personal hell. Your brain receives the reward for viewing the self as idealized without engaging in any actualization. Without intending the analogy to sound too carnal, it is the equivalent of masturbatory ideation, the concept being ideated on identity. The longer you stare at the idealized self, the more it dawns on you that the reflection does not exist anywhere outside of the mirror. A lens that sucks the soul of whomever looks into it long enough. I could not conceive of a more insidious trap, yet we ourselves invented it. We took this digital fentanyl and we placed it front and center for everybody to face head on the moment they began their digital existence. Even though you can walk away from the first mirror you see, you can never really escape it. It's like a reoccurring enemy. Every world you go to, the vast majority are likely to have one implemented somewhere, if not multiple places. The mirror also exists in your UI as an ever-present temptation that you can summon and place anywhere. While it serves its purpose as a practical tool and utility feature, it also provides the user with no escape from the possibility of reverting to this primal behavior. What makes this dragon difficult to slay, especially for new users, is the social pressure and compulsion that comes with going where the people are. You want to meet new people? Chances are you can find somebody to talk to in front of a mirror. You can see how the developers implemented the balancing for co-op by making the boss more difficult to defeat the more people attempt to challenge it. You can't even necessarily blame Straz or Tupper for it either, because it's not like they invented the mirror, nor did they put them in all the worlds that use them. We will get lost in the UGC rabbit hole if I keep thinking about this, and we've already covered this topic. While we're retreading some ground, let's remember the objective is to avoid going hollow. So we're seeking connections, and we've fallen for the trap in front of the mirror. Why do I keep calling it a trap outside of all of the reasons I've already stated? Because the mirror is the single worst place in the game to make connections. Everyone you're likely to encounter is as inexperienced as you are, and if they aren't, then it should be a glaring red flag. Imagine for a moment playing your favorite MMO, and you've just made a new character and you're leveling up in the starting zone. You stumble across a high-level player and you say something like, oh wow, you're such a high level, I bet you've seen all sorts of different stuff from the game or have some really cool gear. Only for them to reply with, me? Oh no, I've never left the starting region. I'm still using the outfit and equipment I got from my first few quests. You would look at that person and think, wow, what a loser. At least that's what you would think if the objectives or reasons why you were playing the game were made more clear to players. I'm not saying the game needs to add a Firekeeper to the default homeworld instance that urges players to open the Creator Companion and mend the broken world they've inherited, or a quest giver that tasks the player to add 10 random people as friends. It's just that... Fuck. There's so many caveats and little things I could get lost in tangents explaining, then why exactly did I spend all that time in VRChat anyway?